Let me turn it over to our first keynote speaker, and there will be time at the end for questions and a little bit of dialogue. And all I say is, if you do have a question, you're online, just type it in the Q&A section, so we know that those of you who are there obviously will be able to tell if you happen to raise your hand. Okay.
Well, thank you, Peter, for the nice words, the nice introduction. And I think there are few people in the industry that are so well connected as you are, because you have been there for as long as I can remember. We've met in 2004 for the first time, nearly 20 years ago. And I think that's the reason why you know nearly everyone in the industry, if it's in the East, in the West, or in Europe. You've seen them all, and that's the reason why when you need to have a connection to somebody you don't know, call Peter and he will tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be here in this conference speaking to you. A very good blend of the entire industry. Before I come to my presentation, just briefly on myself, Matthias Zachert. I'm in the industry for around about 30 years. I'm a happy family father of 4 children that daily pose different problems, but net, this is joyful. I'm married to a wonderful wife who I know for more than 25 years, and I'm basically a chemical veteran. I started my professional career with Höchst. The older of you might still know who that company was. It was the biggest chemical and pharmaceutical in the world in the 80s. It has disappeared. So I've worked for Höchst 8 years, saw the transformation. I led the integration work with Ron Poulenc and Höchst. And then I left Höchst and eventually went the chemical route. I became the first CFO when Lanxess was founded in 2004. I was the only external board member at that point in time. I left Lanxess in 2011 because I disagreed with the former strategy and I wanted to leave in good terms. I like always teamwork. And when one member of the team doesn't believe in the strategy, he should say farewell to the team and go his own way and take consequences. I then went into a pharma chemical company called Merck, KGaA, that's the German branch. I'd been there for 3 years as CFO, and then I got a call from the supervisory board chairman of Lanxess. He said, "You were right, we were wrong. Can you please come back and fix it?" And that's what I tried to do from 2014 onwards. So that's my personal background. And now I move into the presentation. And Peter and I discussed, what should I talk about? I mean, should I talk about global trends in the chemicals? And I guessed when we have chemical pros here, you will all know about the global trends. Should we talk about specific items like sustainability? We could. And then the two of us said, there's so much happening in Europe. There's a strong participation in this conference of the world and heavily tilted towards the United States. So why, as a CEO of a chemical German European-focused company with global reach, why don't you give an update on chemical industry, Europe, core Vadis? That's what we are going to address today. So very brief on ourselves, Lanxess. We have been spun off 2004 with a completely different portfolio. At that point in time, we were polymer-based. For those of you that are long enough in the industry, and I see Rob and Jonathan, at that point in time, our 7 billions were composed of 5 billions polymer. Yes, we did have ABS, styrenics. Yes, we had polymers. And we were the biggest synthetic rubber producer in the world. with around about 3.5 billion sales, competing eye to eye at that point in time with the giant Exxon, with the giant SABIC, the giant Sinopec, and however, of course, without backward integration. So that was the portfolio setup in those days. This has completely changed. I will address that in a moment. Today, we are supplier and solution provider to companies like SABIC, Exxon, and Sinopec. We are no longer competing with them. We are trying to find solutions for win-win situations. The company is located worldwide, a legacy, of course, in Europe still, but production-wise, we are everywhere, in every country where chemicals have a meaningful market share. Direct employees, 13,000. With joint ventures, etc., we had 16,000, but this is the 100% employee base. Sales last year around about 8 billion. And the strategy that I've embarked on in 2014 when I joined as CEO was the following: exiting mass markets that are 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion in size. We did not want to focus on anymore. So we took the decision to exit rubber. Other companies stepped in. I see Reliance here. Reliance started to build rubber, and we were exiting rubber. SABIC, Aramco, Saudi Aramco were focusing on rubber. We sold rubber to them. But not only products, the entire business. So focusing on small, mid-sized markets. So the biggest markets we currently focus on is around about 3-4 billion in size globally. These are markets we like. These are markets where we normally enter as a big player, competing with mid-sized companies, at best companies that are of our own size. The investment strategy was very clearly focusing on consolidating within Europe, but expanding through investments and also M&A in Asia and notably in the United States. Sustainability was one thing that I always had very high on the agenda. Not only because I have 4 children at home who raise daily the question, what am I doing? And I take that seriously, but more business-wise focused, I believe that sustainability can be a real business case. When you are faster in Europe versus peers, you get certificates. And if you don't use certificates for justifying your emissions, you can sell them. And that's what we have started doing, because we have an excess of certificates due to the aggressive reduction in CO2 emissions. So sustainability can not only be a terrifying element, it can help you creating a business case. So overview on Lanxess. Now, what have we done over the last few years? Peter addressed that we went through a massive transformation. This is basically the reflection of this. We left polymers completely. We had 3.5 billion sales in synthetic rubber that was sold to Aramco. We had a polyamide business where we were one of the top 5 players worldwide. That was the biggest remaining polymer asset in our company. And we contributed it or sold it to Advent. Here, a 60% stake, and together Advent ourselves acquired the DSM polyamide business and now created basically one of the biggest top 3 polyamide players in the world. We still hold 40% in it, but no longer 100%. So this is the strategic direction we took, and we execute. Basically, this was the last big move portfolio-wise to get completely polymer-free and focusing on niche chemicals, specialty additives, specialty businesses. So whilst getting proceeds of 6 billion, we reinvested that without equity, without adjusting dividends. We did that fully internally financed. We created a pure additives division through acquiring as listed company here known in the US, Kentura Corp. That was a publicly listed acquisition that we announced 2016, completed 2017. We consolidated also our flavor and fragrances business. This has become now a worldwide new leader next to our additives division. Then we consolidated the active and disinfections business. You might know the business called Micron from DuPont. It's a disinfection business, and we also consolidated the microbial control business that was combined between Dow and DuPont. So basically the entire microbial control business of the Western world has come together under one roof, now called Lanxess. And having started in Höchst, I now see that basically the old biocides microbial control business of the entire Western world, which used to be in DuPont, Dow, and Bayer, has now come eventually together as a team up. And of course, now we have to extract the maximum profitability, cash, and technology position out of it, which will take us a few years, but then I think it will be ready to run. So the philosophy was get out of business that have high volatility, high asset intensity, and are more cyclical. Don't get me wrong, these are still good businesses, but at the end of the day, they don't fit to the theme that I will outline to you in a few moments. The business that we focused on are purely chemicals, mid-sized niche markets that tend to be light in assets and light in CO2 and tend to be higher in cash generation and lower CO2 exposure. The footprint that we now have is different than before. We used to be very much focusing on EMEA. 5 years ago, we had around about 12% of sales in the United States. You see that this has vastly changed. We are now at 33%. The market in the United States has become our second biggest in the world. And if you look to the investments we've done over the last few years, you see that Americas was the epicenter of investments, organically, inorganically. We kept Europe stable, and we are currently humble on Asia. And this has basically started definitely in 2020. And in the last 2-3 years, we remained very humble in the position we take in Asia and here notably China. In India, we continued investing. We used to be known for having 60% of sales in the automotive space. On the right-hand side, you see the industry split. We've exited the mobility sector massively. We like mobility, but it now has an exposure of around about 10 percentage points. So no longer a core risk in the automotive space. If automotive industry is doing well, you rejoice. But when they have their hiccups, you have deep problems when you have an exposure more than 50%. So this has vastly changed. And that's my feedback on Lanxess. So you see the transformation. And now you see also in the next chapter why we have done that. And we saw basically already 5-6 years ago the tendency towards these trends. That's the reason why we focused on the strategy, also on the regional strategy. And now I tell you how we at Lanxess look at Europe, Vadis chemical industry. We conclude that Europe is in a tough setup right now. We have 2 regions that are definitely looking also out for high margin markets. Europe still is a high margin chemical market, as all of you who are in this industry know pretty well. We see that the United States is re-emerging also as industrial power with good energy supply chain input costs. We see, of course, that China is no longer in a situation where they just import. They have turned to many of the chemical products self-sufficient and are now addressing the export heavily. With the United States as a key market, but due to the import duties at a lower scale, the massive market, which is a opportunity for China, is the European market, where import duties are definitely not as strong as in the United States. We see regionalization, which for some of us is a benefit. I mean, we clearly see a benefit to it because we see that many of our customers that went to China and India are now coming back to Europe and want to get the regional supply chains in place. This is a benefit. But of course, when you look at building blocks, it means that Europe loses export markets in the future, and this is a downside. Eventually, if you go to the core of Europe, and I will explain that in more detail, we have a competitive disadvantage as far as input costs are concerned, and this relates primarily to energy. This relates also to other cost factors that are definitely driven by bureaucracy and regulation. So that's the picture. I will now go into details. Hey, many of you have been in this industry for decades. Around this time, in the 90s, I've entered chemicals. And for those of you who have forgotten, this was the league table in the chemical sector in the 90s and 80s. It was dominated by Europe and the Americas. Names you saw there were the big Germans, the Europeans, and the Americans. Some of these names have vanished, like Höchst, gone, ICI, Prime, trade name, brand, gone. Sieber, bought, Rhône-Poulenc, merged, Monsanto now with Bayer. If this was the right thing is a different story for a different conference. 2010, new picture. The Asians and Middle East surfaced. I can tell you in 2010, this was a key shocker for at that point in time for many in Europe, because we were assuming that the Middle East will now massively penetrate the European market. They started doing this, but at a far lower pace than originally assumed. But you see that 2010, the league table was always reshuffled quite heavily. Now look at 2020. What is obvious, red dominates more and more. One out of the top 3 Germans is still there, BASF, but the others have focused on life science, like Bayer, and Höchst disappeared. So here the picture is clearly more and more diverse compared to this one here. Many of the German and Swiss chemical giants at that point in time already realized they don't want to focus on chemicals, they rather focus on pharmaceuticals and crop protection and leave out the big petrochemicals. So this was a trend already starting in 2010 that definitely accelerated in 2020. Now, you might call it provocative statement, but it's always good to make strong statements for igniting the discussion. My provocative statement is, in 2035, the Asians and Middle East will dominate the big-scale chemical sector. This is just chemicals, specialties, petrochemicals, commodities, what have you. And my provocative statement is, in 2035, completely different to 50 years before, this chemical industry will be dominated by the Asians, by the Middle East. The United States will play a role. The question is how big and how far you are at the top. You have the input costs, the raw materials to play it. But of course, it depends on individual strategies. And Europe, at best, 1-2 companies might be still on the league table. I know Martin Brudermüller very well. He will not like me to say that, and he will do everything and his team to prove me wrong, but I mean, I'm here to have my own call, and this is the assumption I take for 35. Why? Because there are 4 elements that, from my point of view, will drive this process in continental Europe with the chemical sector. The one is input costs on the energy side and raws. Second is global demand and self-sufficient markets. In China, I mean, most of our products that we've exported massively to China too, self-sufficient. export has massively shrunk. We see the opposite. Now that the domestic market in China is sluggish, China exports to us. So it's exactly the opposite way around. No longer we exporting to them, they start exporting to us. And of course, if you look into demand in Europe is not soaring. It's sluggish. If you go to geopolitics, Europe was definitely a region that benefited from global trade. We could export left, we could export right, north, south, whatever. We could use the European market, but of course a lot went, 20-30% always went into the export abroad. And we have increasing regulation. This, however, can be a benefit for Europe or the downside. I will come to that now. Input costs. I won't go through the fact that we don't really have a lot of oil and gas in continental Europe. Some hubs here in Norway, some hubs here in the UK, but not meaningful. If you look at energy, energy is costly in Europe. If you make the comparison here to Europe and Henry Hub, I think graphically it shows disadvantage. If you look at the data, we're at least 3 times more expensive on gas and energy than you are here in the United States. Petrochemicals, many fossil product groups in the chemical sector need energy intensively, need cheap raw materials, fossil raw materials still until they change. And therefore this in itself doesn't call for competitiveness on especially the bulk chemical products. Disadvantage. Next one is demand. I mean, black, average 10 years, red, 23. Europe was not great on growth, always subpar compared to the United States and definitely to Asia. And if you look in 23, I mean, 23 was not a great year. In Europe, slight growth, single digit, below 1. In Germany, it will be minus 0.2 or minus 0.3, so everything but glorious. And if you look at chemicals, we are down 4.44% in consumption. That's the reason why you basically have seen profit warnings by European chemical companies in a magnitude that I've never seen in my chemical professional life before. Second quarter, any chemical company posted profit warnings. Even in Lehman times, we did not see that. And that shows to all of you how severe the chemical downturn and the circumstances were in the chemical industry in 2023. I think we've now found the bottom. I mean, we now start to see green shoots, as you call it here in the United States, here and there. But it has been a tough time. If you look at studies in the industry, you basically can see that volume declines in chemicals, even in the severe downturns after the Lehman crisis, were 4 quarters. When you look at the pandemic, 4 quarters volume decline. When you look at 2023, we are already at 6 quarters volume decline, especially in Europe. And that's the reason why I call that the severest supply and demand shock that we have seen in the last 20, 30 years. I clearly consider this downturn as far more severe than pandemic and Lehman crisis was. The good thing is we've bottomed out now. So I'm not a great believer in 24 that everything will be back to party, but at least some of the evil drivers for 23 have finished. And that's the positive for 24. As bad as 23 it will not be. And then, of course, let's do everything to accelerate as fast as possible out of it. So this is the second driver which constrains Europe. So the first was input costs, notably energy. Second, subdued growth in the region. And now let's come to external shocks. I mean, US trade conflict, we know since 2016 there was some president here in the United States who made sure that trade will be addressed in a different way. Russian invasion led to price inflation, energy inflation. The Hamas war, let's see. I mean, let's hope that this is not going to escalate. If it escalates, this is the region where the oil comes from. In the 80s, we all know what oil shocks led to. And that, of course, would hit the entire industry, also chemicals, hard, if this would escalate massively further. And nobody of us knows what will happen in Taiwan. I mean, I've spoken to militaries, I've spoken to ministers and experts in order to have a better understanding. But I think all of us need to deal with volatility, need to be agile and take it from there. But this definitely makes it in the chemical space not easier. We have to deal with it. And now I come to something specific, that is regulation. And here I clearly tell you this has disadvantages, can have advantages and opportunities as well. This is what happens in Europe. You know that in Europe, the European Commission was newly elected, I think it was 2018, with a new commission, with a new president, Ursula von der Leyen, and a guy who was Commissioner for Trade and Industry, Mr. Timmermans, coming from the Netherlands. And then basically they decided to revolutionize Europe and be the sustainability leader in the world. So the Green Act was announced 2019, and what happened afterwards is year-on-year regulations which impact the industry and notably the chemical industry. So new Circular Economy Act was passed in 20, Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, heavy focus only on chemicals, passed in 2020, Taxonomy for the reporting. We have all worked on taxonomy. Nobody understands this in the financial community, by the way. It was solely done for the financial community. And my feedback to you is, in the last 2 years, I got not only one, I did not even get one question from one investor. And when I asked them myself, do you know what taxonomy is? Yeah, nobody understands. It's democratic bullshit. But we have at least 100,000 consultants who are earning their money on advising company how to develop taxonomy. We as a company with 8 billion sales, we have a department for that, we do that. I don't want to know how the small, medium-sized company are dealing with this. We have also in 21 a program called Fit for 55. For those of you, this is not designed for people who are 55 and they get a document that they do jogging and cardiovascular training every day. No, this is designed for chemicals. It means that from 1919 to 2030, you have to reduce your emissions by 55 percentage points, period. We have overpassed this, so for us it's of no meaning really. There are other regulations that are now coming. It's CSDD. It has to do with value chains that need to be audited. And if you are interested, I will tell you about the details, but then you might fall asleep. REACH revision, I think all of us knew this, know this already. We have labeling and packaging, eco-design for products. And as far as reporting is concerned, this affects everybody, not only chemicals. The entire industry is the CSRD directive, that is a corporate responsibility reporting. It will inflate our annual report by around about 50 to 100 pages. And you can read everything, what we are doing on water, on waste, on emissions, on what cars we are driving, etc., etc. So all of this is happening as we speak in order to be the leader for sustainability in Europe. And now my stance on this, we have established a sustainability committee. I lead the sustainability committee. We do that on a quarterly basis. Our company is on track of everything that you see here. We have decided for this year, for instance, and for that year, to hire 25 or 30 toxicologists from the market early. That was a strategic decision. When we saw the drafts of this report, we saw that we need to do a lot of studies to prove that our products are good, not toxic, etc., etc. So we as company decided a few years ago, when this is coming and we don't prepare for that, we will find no person anymore in the market to do it. Or we go for consultants that take your money and run. So we decided to hire toxicologists, and a few other companies did that as well, like BASF and the like. You guys know the top 20 European chemical companies because they're listed, they are big. You will not be aware of the fact that in Europe we have 30,000 chemical companies. 30,000. 20 you know. The others you don't know. But most of them have to go through the same kind of wonderful work. And my feedback to you is they will not make it. They will use the white flag and surrender. That's exactly not what the European Commission wants. But you know, politicians sometimes think the alphabet consists of A and B, and afterwards they realized that it goes down to Z. And Z means industry consolidation. We are prepared for that. I said to my teams, let's get all of that as speedy in place, and then let's use this as an opportunity. Therefore, industry consolidation, from my point of view, will happen in Europe, also driven by this. So I've addressed the 4 challenges of Europe. Now let's be a little bit outward looking. Our assumption is this is going to happen. So our answer to what I've just explained will be cost, energy, and efficiency. All of us are currently firing people. We are taking up 1,000 people out of the 13,000. We are currently closing the plants that are too energy intensive and where we don't think that the market will be able to take the costs of our products, including energy. We just close them. We reduce our cost base by 1,000 people. That regains the competitiveness that we've lost through energy. And therefore, we simply take the consequences now, and I see that my peers are doing the same thing. Martin Brudermüller is doing that. We see that with Evonik, we see that with Clariant, we see that everywhere. This is done within the company, we do that ourselves. But what we are focusing in our company right now heavily on is innovation and especially digitization, and here notably AI. AI has advanced nicely over the last 3 years. We started with AI already 3-4 years ago, but it was not practical enough for sales procurement. Now they have advanced massively and we can use them. There's software available that we can introduce in our company. We are doing this. Sustainability, we've always embarked on, we accelerate further. I mean, we used to be a few years ago at 6 million tons emitted. That was 2016, I think. We are now down to below, this year we will be the first time below 2 million. And the rest we want to eliminate as well. So we massively advance on sustainability. We clearly focus on specialties. And where my picture is, there is the last one. Once we have advanced, this is all what you do internally. The last thing is, for me, industry consolidation. My assumption is, once we have addressed our own stuff, new players will emerge. I've always seen that in challenging times. New players will emerge, and you will have leaders in specialty chems, which Germany was not known for 30 years ago. Now, in Germany and Europe, we will have leaders in specialty chems. So don't underestimate Europe. I think the pressures of today, if you face them, if you address them, you can also turn opportunities out of it. What will definitely happen, that's at least my call, you will no longer have in Europe companies with a majority of their sales being in bulk and petrochemicals. That will be gone. That will be taken by Middle East, that will be taken by Reliance in India, by Asia and China, and potentially some companies in the United States. Let's see where LyondellBasell will go. They are big enough to survive and to enlarge their space. I think sustainability will be a core advantage, and I think we will be able to lead the pack here in terms of green products, green value chains. The technology, I mean, if you don't embrace technology now, you miss something. And what I've seen as a new element emerging, we've all seen in the digital world that ecosystems turn important. My belief is that in Europe, there will be new ecosystem in chemicals emerging as well. If this leads to partnerships in input costs, in technology, in product development, to be seen. So far, our industry was extremely conservative. We always wanted to do our own thing. I think in 10 years, this will break up. So there will be new chemical companies emerging that you possibly don't know of today. But in 10, 15 years, I think Europe will face a different setup of companies with different focus. And the focus that I've explained will be the one that we will take as Lanxess, and we want to be one of them. Thank you very much.
So we're going to, I'll ask him a few questions, but then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. And so, you know, there are many friends of mine who are CEOs of companies, and they say, this is certainly one of the both exciting but challenging times to be a CEO of any global company, because it's not just oil, whatever, but it's geopolitical issues, it's supply chains, so forth. Do you see, if you look though at the, you go back a couple decades, people were saying U.S. economy is so mature, there's no potential for growth, and yet now, each time there's some resilience, and they've shifted and somehow found a way to succeed. That might be the story of Europe as well, but as you said, it may not be by following exactly the way you've done before, because even though energy or prices are high, on the other hand, there are distinct advantages of the European Union, and also this desire, the risk profile in Asia has shifted, which is both opportunity and also cost. In that sense, where do you see these geopolitical supply chain things? Are there advantages that have come out of that for Europe that might help the European chemical industry do better?
Well, I've definitely seen that Corona left its mark in the approach by customers. So we saw after 2020 and 21, 22, many customers of ours that spend a lot of time on how can they source from Europe. And we saw customers that have clearly increased their regional sourcing, so that was a clear positive. And we even had a big consultant company that was for me remarkable, a global consultant company, and many of you know them. They went with a new advisory project to clients that was called Free China Value Chain. And we even saw that some customers of ours embarked on that. And they tested what kind of value chain do they get from us? Is it European-based? Is it North American-based? So therefore, the regionalization topic is one that strongly emerged after Corona and the disrupted value chains. However, they came to a halt to some extent when Europe suddenly was confronted with this huge energy hike, with this huge energy spike. And we had the situation that most of the chemical companies having a strong order for 21 and even 22 because of disrupted value chains were suddenly confronted that customers said, oh, we are not going to pay your huge energy bill. we start looking outside, and that happened in 2023. So opportunistically, I would say companies are still trying to regionalize their value chains, which is positive for us in the European industry. But in 23, due to the distortion on energy, it was coming to a halt. Will it come back again? My assumption is yes.
In fact, the energy side is not necessarily long-term, right? Because a lot of things that happen with that prices and trade are not necessarily things that would stay forever, right? Such as the pricing and supply and the shifting gradually might shift. Do you see I hosted a debate a week ago. Is the Chinese economy permanently impaired or temporarily? It was a lively debate and discussion. And the reason why I ask that is that China, the emergence of the Chinese competitors and so forth has been a challenge. But on the other hand, the disruptions that are happening in the Chinese economy, the clash between the Communist Party's goals and the ability to grow their economy, right? They're clamping down the technology in mid-sized countries, et cetera. So do you see positives as well as the negatives associated with Chinese competition?
Well, I think we have currently we see all the evils. Will the evils, let's take out Taiwan, but let's look at the current evils. Will this prevail? Will this continue one-to-one? My feedback is clearly no way. If we look at China, it's a 1.3, 1.4 billion population with one huge middle class. They are currently unsecure. They are not so bullish, but that can change quickly. Second, when this changes towards local consumption, you will see less products in Europe, which is a benefit for definitely for the chemical business in Europe. Third, and that I've always seen, and we have all seen that with the zero COVID strategy. When China goes towards uncertainty in the population, and suddenly hundreds, thousands of Chinese put up the white paper, it irritates the political party. The one thing that the politicians in the party in China don't want is unrest. And what we currently have, I've spoken to my managers in China very often, the generation that now enters the labor markets, they do delivery service, they do all sorts of normal jobs. You have a high level of uncertainty. That is exactly the population, exactly at the age where the party doesn't want to have unrest or insecurity. And therefore, my view on China is this is something that they will more and more try to settle through, again, investments, again, credits. I think what they now are addressing very clearly is the crunch in real estate. Real estate has been a contributor to their GDP by 25–30%. They deflate the bubble currently in a very focused way, but then they will start to support it again. And then my take on what I read economic-wise and through discussions, we will go through softness in China. But again, it's a 1.3, 1.4 billion market. This market will be interesting for all of us.
Well, it's very interesting because we deal with a lot of people with the experts in that side, and there's a real dilemma trying to figure out what's happening in China. And you don't actually wish you don't wish negative things for them because the global economy just will tie together. If they sink, it's not necessarily just a positive for you. But one dilemma right now is the control of population, which is a big priority for the communist government. But the other is all these structural problems. They've got a declining population, and yet they've got, by most measures, 30 or 40% unemployment for the young people. And the reason is structural, because the Chinese government said, we all want you to go to technical schools, get college degrees, get advanced degrees. So all the young people did that. But then they clamped down on all the companies that hire those people. So all the high-tech companies, so forth. So there were no jobs. And so these young people come out and they don't want to make iPhones, right? Right? And so they're laying flat. A lot of them, they could get a job, but they don't want to work in manual labor. So you got this dilemma, and yet this group is critical to the well-being of the Communist Party, right? So you're going to find some huge, I personally, not sure how it's all going to come out. All I know is that either way, it's a problem. If China prospers, they become a stronger competitor. If they don't do well, then they create a havoc for the global economy. So either way, it's not entirely good news.
We need China. I mean, it's the second biggest economy in the world. China helped worldwide economy after Lehman crash. Let's not forget it. They were the first to massively invest and to reignite the global engine, and therefore it has become a power in the world's economic system. And we need to find ways how to win together and not against each other.